So when you turn on your computer, the first thing that happens is it says, hey, what's going on? The BIOS wakes up, the basic in-out system. And a lot of times these have a graphical user interface over top of it, or a GUI, and these are called a UEFI. And don't worry about the terms, just know that there's a little computer inside of your computer that gets things started. This little computer knows how to run itself, it knows how to use itself, it's just hard programmed into the machine. But this little computer starts the more complicated thing that you're used to. It opens up Windows or even OS X. And when it opens it up, what it does is it grabs it out of the storage, out of the hard drive, and then it puts your operating system into the RAM. Now your operating system is usually too big to fit on your table space. So it usually pulls out the pieces it needs. This is already a big job for a lot of lower end computers. So if you have a computer that's struggling to run your operating system, you can bet you're going to have a computer that's struggling to run your NLE. So now your computer's doing basic things just to exist. It's doing basic graphical changes. It's handing things to the graphics card, getting things back from the graphics card. It's looking for updates. It's probably opening Chrome in the background, and Chrome takes up some of your RAM. The more things your computer is doing at the same time, the more of your table space is being taken up by its activities. So the next thing to do is to open your NLE. So you've already usually got a few things going on, but now let's open up your NLE. Your NLE is going to be this stack of blocks here with a hat on it. So as your computer's doing all these things, it's also talking and looking with your NLE. And your NLE is going to have specific needs. Your NLE is going to ask for a certain amount of table space to work with. It's usually going to ask for a larger amount of table space. So this table space is where it's going to pull up its video. Now if you've got standard def video, low def video, poorly rendered tiny video, you're just going to need a little bit of space, and so you're going to have plenty of room for your NLE is going to have plenty of room to play and to operate with this video footage, especially if it's got extra room to hand it to the graphics card and get it back from the graphics card. But here's the deal. When you start editing things that have a higher bit rate and just more pixels, when there's just more information like 4K, you're going to need more table space to work with, and your processor, which is already doing other things like moving things around and keeping your computer running, is also going to have to grab more things, to move more things, to scoot more things around. So that is why a computer gets more and more bogged down when you have more and more video that you're editing. Something to consider is you have a processor, and this processor needs to actually talk to the operating system. So the operating system does something very special. It says, hey, why don't you write me a little program that tells me how to talk to different pieces of hardware. So when you plug in a camera, when you plug in a new microphone, when you plug in anything to your computer, it says, how do I talk to it? And usually you install what's called a driver. Now, for our purposes here, this little green block is going to be the driver. This is the hardware. Your computer says, how do I use it? And then you use a driver for your operating system to talk through the driver to your hardware. So that's why you can take a driver out and install a newer, better driver. Sometimes your driver can even cause issues. If the program hasn't updated to match the driver, or the driver hasn't been updated to match the program, sometimes there's bugs or things that have been causing issues, and an update will fix those issues. Our NLE through the operating system is trying to use a driver to talk to your hardware. And this driver can be a weak link sometimes. Sometimes it's too updated and your programs haven't caught up to use the update well yet. Sometimes it's not updated enough and your programs are trying to use it as if it's updated. Sometimes it works just fine. Most of the time it works just fine and you don't notice any problems. Keeping your drivers updated with a current stable version is a great way to keep your computer ticking along smoothly as you're editing. So now let's pretend that this box isn't your processor anymore or any other random piece of hardware. This is your GPU. Your GPU has a lot of special issues because your GPU, since it's its own little computer and it's super important, it does a lot of super important things and it's very, very complicated, usually has extremely precarious drivers. So you can see as you add different pieces to the driver, it can get a little wonky and sometimes mess up. The weird thing about GPUs too is not just professionals use them. It's not just NLE workers, it's also graphic designers, it's also photo editors, it's also people using Blender to create 3D objects, it's video game creators, it's also people playing video games. In fact, a lot of people buying these graphics cards are people playing video games. So the drivers are often tailored to the people playing video games, updating for the latest video games coming out. So as you're rapidly updating your graphics card, you find out that this little driver, this little piece of software in the middle, gets wonky and causes all sorts of issues because your NLE is having to deal with all these changes that really have nothing to do with it. A way to get around that is to install a workstation driver. There are particular drivers that manufacturers, people who make the graphics cards, will hand out, which are designed to be more stable and less changing for the parts that your graphics card is using, things like video editing and image creation and 3D model rendering, not things like keeping the highest frame rate in the latest Call of Duty game. So keep that in mind when you're installing drivers, that installing a workstation driver might be a help to you.